Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Thursday afternoon. I have the pleasure to have David Ogilvie with me today to talk us through some of the strategies in relation to conquering a disrupted supply chain. There's obviously a lot of change that's going on at the moment in the supply chain, and we've got the pleasure of bringing somebody who knows what they're talking about in the space, has a number of years of experience in the space as well. And I'll give David a proper intro just shortly. So from a presenter's perspective, I'm Robert Jurcec. I'm the CEO and founder of OneKloudX. We're a NetSuite solution provider. And we also dabble in other products as well, like Salesforce and now OnecledeX, and any other solutions that kind of bring in that business tech into an organization, purely working with true cloud solutions. David, we have as well. I'll let you quickly introduce yourself, David, and then and I'll give you a real detailed bio and about yourself.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks for having us come along today. David Ogilvie. I run my own consulting business. I work primarily with manufacturing firms and distribution companies. I guess I effectively help executives build profitable companies, and I do that through the use of supply chain tools and ERP systems. So that's a very high summary of what I do.
Thank you, David. So from an agenda standpoint today, we'll just cover the actual elements we'll be focusing on today. We have a jam-packed hour worth of information, both from David and myself. So I'll introduce David to you. We'll jump into his 4V supply chain model that he's built, and take you through that and what it means to you and those organizations in the manufacturing wholesale distribution space. Why supplier management from all tiers is vital to get right in order to avoid any supplier friction. Actions to improve your planning and forecasting. And then I'll take you through the NetSuite solution and show you some of the functionalities around supply allocations, looking at vendor scorecards, and taking you through the solution as to how that can help you as well from a tech side of things based on what David's discussed today. And then we'll have any questions at the end as well. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you will see a little chat. In that chat, please feel free to ask any questions as you like, whether it's from David or myself. And then I'll interrupt David or interrupt myself in order to answer the question for you on the fly. So we want this to be an interactive session with you so you 100%. Can get the most out of what you can.
Yep.
So a little bit about OneKloudX in case you don't know us. We're a NetSuite solution provider. I personally have been in the ERP game for over 20 odd years, implementing multiple ERP solutions on both the client side and the supplier side. OneKloudX has been around for the last 4.5 years now, and from that period of time, we've been implementing and supporting NetSuite clients or organizations, looking to move onto the NetSuite platform as their ERP choice. So we cover everything from wholesale distribution organizations, manufacturing, professional services, non-for-profit, software companies. So we cover a fair few industries, whether they're service-based or product-based. And I'm lovely to have some of the customers here today as well. So that's a bit about us and what we do. Over 100 clients now we have in terms of implementations in that period of time, and rescues as well as part of that. In addition to NetSuite, we also manage other implementations as well. So that of Salesforce, of Almo Cloud HR, which is an Australian ASX-listed cloud HR solution that manages HR onboarding, LMS like learning management, rostering, payroll, and the like. And then we have other add-on solutions to the NetSuite platform like Fast Forward that does the AP automation side of things, Infinite Cloud that does the payroll side of things, and NetSuite from an Australian, New Zealand, and UK perspective. And then we're also partners of Soligo, that is an infrastructure platform as a service, Deputy, Easy Collect, and other suite app solutions that we manage and implement as well as part of our team. So a bit about David. So I'd like to introduce David. He's got a number of years of experience in the ERP space and the supply chain management, and it actually makes him one of the world-leading business improvement specialist in the market today. He works with executives, both from publicly listed and private companies, to help them build their strategic direction and apply technology to improve their operational performance and profitability. He has developed a number of industry-leading IP, including some that have beautiful names that I'll mention, and David will go into it as well. They're all trademarked, so you can't steal these names, and I promise I won't. Sure Select, which is a methodology for selecting the right products and software vendors for your business. The ERP Success Formula, which is a framework and method for keeping digital transformation and technology projects on track. Because as we know, the complexity around ERP obviously can be a big break for organizations. So he manages making sure that they're delivered based on what was promised to be delivered. And then one he'll be talking about today, which involves the 4V supply chain model framework for building supply chain resiliency into the operation. So he's also a published author, a speaker, and a consultant in high demand. So we're very privileged to have David today with us as part of this webinar. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, sir. So you'd like me to kick off?
Go for it. All yours. Stage is all yours.
Okay, so let me just share my screen, and hopefully we have the 4V model. And I'm just getting a little bit of feedback here, so give me 2 seconds. Okay, so what can you see?
We see the beautiful coastline with Demio.
And that's exactly the opposite way to the way we practiced it. Go figure.
That's all right.
Okay, can you see the 4V model now?
Yeah, perfect. Great.
Okay,
yes.
So as Rob mentioned, I developed this model really because I found over the years of working with manufacturing firms and so forth that a framework actually helps you contextualize your day-to-day activities. So it helps you with the lens that you view your business through. So let's just dive straight into it. So for every supply chain, for any product that's in the market at the moment, we really have a point of origin over here on the left, and I'm hoping you can see my cursor as well. And then over here on the right, you have a point of consumption. And between those 2 points, there's a whole series of different businesses, one of which will be yours, that are transacting with each other to make things happen. And the main activities that go on really distribute material through the supply chain, you distribute information, and potentially most importantly, you distribute money, as in dollars. And as you can see, it's a circular motion, so the material and the information and the money will flow in both directions from point of origin to consumption and backwards again. So the 4 V's really are a framework to help you view these things. And the first one obviously is visibility. So the key piece there is looking at how visible is your material throughout the process, how visible is your information, and how visible is your money. Secondly is velocity. That is the speed at which each of these elements flows through the whole process. And they're the 2 areas that I'm going to focus on for today. I won't really dig into the other 2 elements, but so for the 4 pieces that we're trying to get across today are focusing on the visibility and the velocity. But we also look at the vulnerability of your material, the vulnerability of your information, and the money. So yeah, that's around your risk management approaches to these sorts of things and to your supply chain. And obviously then there's a verification that assumptions that are made within the business are actually real, and we can make adjustments based on those verification activities. And as I said, this generates a flow of activity up and down the supply chain. And as I mentioned before, somewhere in there is your company. Now, if you're in the extraction industries, for example, you're certainly positioned much further over here on the left, near the point of origin. If you happen to be in the retail space or in the e-commerce space, you're over here on the right in the point of consumption. But somewhere your business is in between here, and you've got customers and consumers, and then you've got suppliers. And I suppose the distinction between a customer and a consumer is that the consumer is the people who actually consume the product that you're involved in at the very end. So this point of consumption piece here. Now, in order to make that flow of activity and to help us with the visibility, the velocity, identifying what we're vulnerable to, etc., there are a key set of enablers that make all of this happen. Now, while the model diagram is nice and neat and smooth, we all know that the alignment between the handover points between organisations is never as smooth as it first looks. So you'll see what I mean in a minute. So the most fundamental enabler of all is the different mindsets that go on within the businesses. But as I said, your company is here, so you will have a particular mindset. And it may or may not be aligned with your supplier's mindset or your supplier's mindset. Likewise, you may not necessarily be aligned with your customer or your end consumer. And that misalignment will impact the flow and the visibility and the velocity that go on. So it all comes back to initially the mindset of your business, the culture of your business, and how you operate. This then feeds the type of relationships that you have, whether those relationships are internal, and I think manufacturers all understand that there's often some tension between the sales team and the production team and the manufacturing people, and there's that internal tension. So those relationships may or may not be acrimonious. They may or may not be strong. And likewise, externally, both with your suppliers and your customers. So both the culture of the business influences the relationships that you have internally or externally. They combine together then to impact the type of business processes you have. Because 9 times out of 10, you will probably have some manual process put in your business that is there to overcome some relationship shortcoming or some misalignment between you and your customers. So they all impact the way and the type of processes that you have in place. Those processes and relationships also impact the type of technology that you deploy. And clearly Rob's company and the ERP systems that we work with fit into that technology slant. So they are a key enabler to how all of this flow of the visibility, the velocity, the vulnerability, all of these things hang together. And finally, there's the executive dashboards or your KPIs and metrics. Now, these are really important because I think we all understand that what you measure gets done. The issue for me around dashboards is many of them are very poorly constructed. There are lots and lots of examples out there, and I'll give one in a moment, where very poorly designed dashboards always have an unintended consequence, or they get gamed by people. And the example I was going to give, obviously, is by Wells Fargo, the bank in America. I think that's a pretty classic case that most people will understand. But for those who don't, Wells Fargo were measuring and rewarding their tellers for opening new accounts. And the tellers on the shop floor got to a point where they had extracted as many new accounts as possible from the customers that were coming into the branches. So they started to game it. They started to find ways around it. And in order to do that, they started fraudulent activities where they were opening accounts for non-existent people. So that clearly was not the desire or the purpose of that particular dashboard or that measure or that metric, but it was the result. And I think we've all seen many of these dashboards and metrics go awry. So my key message here, I guess, is dashboards are really important around measuring the visibility, the velocity, and the vulnerability of your material, the information, and the money. But those dashboards and metrics need to have the root of their life rooted in behavior. You look at what behaviors you want to occur in the business, find a way to measure that behavior, and then build your metric and so forth around that. And I say that because, probably most importantly, those metrics and dashboards feed the culture, which is the foundation of all of this. So I guess the point of today's exercise is, how can you now apply this to the disrupted supply chains that were currently existing at the moment? Because many of the causes of these disruptions have been out of your control. Excuse me. So what I would suggest, and what the work I do with my clients, is we use this framework to identify the areas that need improvement or work done on them. And it's about understanding, what is visible, how transparent is it, how accurate is it around material information, most importantly, because the money tends to be a byproduct of focusing on the other activities. Now, that visibility might be around how well you understand your supply chain network. How well do you understand, or can you see the information on your orders, not only from your supplier, but the components that supplier is then relying on? So if there's a backup or a blockage in one of their suppliers, how quickly and how visible is that seen by you? And that's a really important component. So I guess the first piece of this is to understand how you can use this framework to understand the existing relationships and so forth that you've got in the business. And as I said right up front, it's about understanding or focusing on the visibility and the velocity. How can you use technology and your dashboards to improve the visibility of your material? And it could be something as simple as you have poor inventory accuracy, and that might be because you're not doing cycle counting enough, or you're not doing stock taking at all. So these sorts of things give you the framework to help you diagnose where the activities need to happen in your business, so that you improve and strengthen those connections that you have in your supply chain, and that you get notified or understand the landscape a lot better and a lot quicker. So specifically, where I would potentially start is understanding the relationships. If you do an 80-20 on your procurement activities, if you can start with the 20% of your suppliers that provide about 80% of the material that you're using, work on the relationships with those 20%, and then take that the extra tier, because that is the really important piece. Because if you can get better visibility around information about constraints that your suppliers are experiencing, that can help you then build your relationship with your customer or your consumer. So, for example, the car industry at the moment is experiencing significant shortages around being able to get cars available for sale. And if you go and put a deposit on a car today, you might have to wait 6, 8, 9, 12 months. So, for example, if Toyota find out that they are able to get chips earlier, or there's going to be a delay further in some of the chips for their vehicles, the dealer is then in a better position to be able to come to you, contact you, help build a relationship with you by advising you what other options are available to you. And that's just that improvement in your customer service level through understanding and having visibility about information that you can then transfer to them, will hopefully reinforce that relationship that you have with your customer and strengthen your business. And then obviously then is building those dashboards. This is the fourth piece that I would like you to take away today, is understanding the importance of building those measures, your metrics on behaviours. And that's pretty much it, Rob.
Thank you, David. That was quite insightful. So I'm sure everyone that's on the call would be able to take away something from that. That's for sure. Especially from the supply chain aspect at the moment, with the level of disruption that's going on there as a result of COVID. Number of ships out, that have, COVID decimated the whole demand aspect for a lot of organizations, and therefore everyone cut costs, and then without realizing when everything opened up again.
And that's a really important piece, because you've got the ships. You've got ships that are sorry, getting bad feedback there. If you've got goods on a container in a ship somewhere, getting that information from your freight forwarder about when the next slot is at a dock that your container can be unloaded. If you can get better visibility around that and get that timeliness of that information back quickly, that helps your decision making. And as I say, then provide you with opportunities to strengthen your relationship with your customers. So that's a good example.
Yeah, 100%. Now I've just found out that my screen is not able to share, so I'm just going to quickly change my settings. This is a lovely thing about Demio. You have to. It might kick me out when I do this, but it's all right. I'll.
And we lost Rob.
I'm back, so let me just share my screen. Sorry about that. Okay, so can you see my screen? Yep.
I can.
Perfect, great. All right, just to kind of connect to the things that David was saying, what I've done today is set up a demo around some of the functionalities that NetSuite provides around managing and having better visibility into your supply chain. A lot of these functionalities you see today are recent additions to the solution, probably over the last 2 releases. So in 2021.1 and 2, and in the 2022.1 release that's just come out, which this is obviously not the upgraded version. So the upgraded version, I think for most clients, will come out around the mid-April mark, around the Easter mark, which further solidifies and further incorporates additional functionality out there that I'll briefly talk about today. So the 2 aspects I want to focus on today is around that demand supply chain equation. So obviously you've got your sales orders coming in, you've got your transfer orders moving stock from one location to another. And as a result, like David mentioned, there's disruptions in the supply chain. So how do you manage those order allocations of supply that's coming from your supplier? How are you currently managing the performance in each and every one of those vendors and suppliers out there in terms of, are they on time? Are they, is their DIFOT looking great and are they always delivering? Or are they always late? And therefore, how are you managing that today in your system? And I'll show you some of the elements around the predictive side of things of what NetSuite has been able to deliver in the last couple of releases, which actually provides visibility to you around looking at historical purchases and historical inbound shipments that come in from your suppliers, and how are they measured against what they said they were originally going to do. So it actually looks at the historical dates that are on these transactions, and then looks at the actual receipts of those transactions in the ERP, in NetSuite, to then define exactly what's the actual predictive analytics associated with these orders, and therefore how do you manage your orders that are in there from a sales order perspective in terms of the demand that is waiting for that stock to come in. So that's what I'll take you through today. So there's 2 bits of the functionality. The first one is called the order allocation aspect. I've just set up the order allocation side of it. There is also additional functionality to manage it at another level. So for instance, managing order allocations based on a sales channel. So you could therefore have a group of customers being A-class customers that are always going to have priority over inventory when sales orders are placed. But I haven't set that level up yet. I've just set up a very simple order allocation, which actually enables you to go and set up, how are you managing your order allocation. So if I go into set up order management, I'm an administrator on this account. So I've logged in as the administrator. If I take you into the order allocation strategies, I've got one set up over here, which is called the predefined available order allocation strategy. So over here is where I'm actually setting up and telling the system as to what do I want the system in order to consider when it comes to future inventory. So when we're planning future inventory, what transactions do we want to have sales allocated to those future orders, whether it's a future purchase order or an inbound shipment or a transfer order. So in that case, we're managing future inventory based on those transactions. So when sales orders come in, they'll automatically assign themselves to those available transactions that supply is getting delivered into, and therefore give you that visibility as to when the actual supply delivery dates are coming in on those orders as well. You have the ability to have allocation periods as well. We're actually limiting the allocation for current and future inventory based on a number of allocation days. The allocation method that I've set up for this is specifically around allocating as soon as possible, where before the actual supply required by date, which is the actual customer date, available quantity, and then also how your system is managing ATP, and therefore how are you allocating the stock against those actual orders. So I've set it up in relation to having a reserved allocation. So it's a commitment allocation. It's not a firm allocation where it's actually allocated at stock. It's just a reserved allocation, which therefore allows you to reallocate the stock as well to other orders if you like. So that's just quickly the setup. And then from there, you'll then go in and allocate the those relevant order allocations to the individual types of transactions. So these are the actual supply allocations that I've defaulted that will automatically be used when you're managing sales orders, work orders, transfer orders, as well as when you're looking at it from an earliest item availability transaction standpoint. So that's the setup of it. It's quite simple. It's quite easy to set up once you know what you want and how you want to manage it. And then from a order allocation standpoint, there's the earliest item availability screen, right? So this is if you've got a customer on the phone and you want to look at a particular item, you just type in, you can search for your item, and then basically based on the quantity and the allocation strategy you've got, coupled with the supply required by date, you can actually see from the individual locations what the quantity on hand is, what the quantity committed is, as in what is committed on particular transactions to date in terms of sales orders or work orders, if they are bill of materials that are being used on those work orders, and therefore what's the available quantity, future quantity, and so on and so forth. If you end up changing the date to a future date, you'll be able to see the impacts on that as well. So this is just a very quick earliest item availability screen that gives you the ability to look at when what's available and what's currently being allocated, and future quantity that's coming as well into the relevant warehouses. And then you also have the ability of looking at it from a total order allocation standpoint perspective. So if I go into the allocate orders page, this is going to take me into a screen, let me just do it for all products, where I can look at based on the filters. So at the moment I'm looking at this from a Melbourne warehouse location standpoint, and I'm looking at sales orders only, okay? So from that perspective, at the moment we're looking at all the individual orders being sales orders, because we're selected sales orders, that is actually having stock allocated to it. And therefore, from that perspective, we are sorting at a particular supply required by date. So this means that from a supply required by date in terms of when the customer is expecting it, these are the actual dates that are there. And then we can look at as well from on top of that, what individual quantities have been allocated to what order, whether they've been allocated based on an inbound shipment, whether they're actually allocated based on inventory sitting at the warehouse, or whether they're allocated against a purchase order if you're not using inbound shipments for that matter. So if I just further restrict it down to a item level, just to kind of make it more easier to view, I can see the individual items. I can drill down to the item level. I can drill into this order level. And then I can also have the ability to reallocate as well, that inventory, if I want to reallocate it to another order. But just by clicking on this particular item quantity allocated section here, I'll be able to see for that particular sales order, which is the sales order 613, I'm able to see that it's actually sourcing the stock from a purchase order that is expecting to come in on this particular date, as well as a transfer order that's actually coming from another warehouse into Melbourne, and I can see the actual statuses as well. If need be, I can also click on the actual purchase order, and I can look at the actual purchase order information as well if need be, get more information as required. So I can easily drill down right to the underlying transactions to see where the actual inventory or where the actual supply is coming from. So this is a very good screen in order to look at your total supply, all your total demand, and therefore where all the actual supply is coming from. And then have the ability to also reallocate if needed as well, from one order to another, where you just select the actual order you want to move the stock to, and it'll move that stock accordingly and allocate it as a committed stock to that order. You won't be able to do it if you actually have it as a firmed allocation. You'd have to go into the order and unfirm that allocation and then be able to move it if required. So that's a nice little view that gives you visibility around that, which is great. And then you've also, so if I was to show this, how this would work in practice, if I go and create an actual sales order, just to quickly show you how it works from an allocation standpoint. Here I am just going into entering a sales order. I will choose a customer. Let me just choose Jackson Plastics. Jackson Plastics will default the subsidiary that it relates to. And then I'll go and choose my actual item. So we'll choose the item we had earlier. You can see that it's there's 550 on back order, and there's another 620 on order, and there's none available at the moment in Melbourne, even though there's a quantity on hand of 35, which is allocated to another order. Now, the actual required by date is the customer required by date. So if I was to add that line in and save it, I will be able to see where it's actually looking at getting the stock from. Now, if there aren't any orders or inbound or POs or any of that nature, it won't allocate it. We'll just use the lead times from the item record for that supplier, and therefore push the days out based on forward scheduling. But you can see here, it's already giving me an alert to say that one or more line items are not able to be scheduled and to be fulfilled by the required by date. So if I go across and have a look, I'll be able to see that the system has actually confirmed that the expected earliest date that it can come, or that this order is able to be expected shipped, is on the 10th of April. And therefore, if I look at the allocated supply, I'll be able to see that it's actually allocated against that inbound shipment, number 8. And then I'll be able to go and look at the inbound shipment, look at the expected delivery date, which is where that date's coming from, the vessel number, the bill of lading, and the like. And then I can go in and see in here, there's the 3 orders that are actually allocating that stock, which is the one that I've just entered as well, included in that. If need be, I can always go in either on the inbound shipment, send a message directly from NetSuite. I can add in the sticky notes here as well to send a message to my purchasing department, asking for, can you confirm that this is actually going to get delivered on that time? I can allocate a task to purchasing and that nature, which is all standard NetSuite stuff that you can use in order to manage communications in your organization from a demand and supply standpoint. So that's just showing you from a sales order as to how it works. And then you also have the ability to go in and, excuse me, reallocate items as well. So you have an actual reallocate item screen where you can go in and select the actual items, look at all the individual orders that are trying to take that inventory. And as you can see at the moment, the inventory is the 35 that's in stock, which is quantity on hand, is actually being taken up by this particular 61648 order. If you decide you want to change it, you just untick it, and all of a sudden you'll see that the inventory moves. If you want to, split it, say 10 goes here and 25 goes there, then as a result, they will therefore split inventory accordingly. But this is you managing it. Like I mentioned earlier, you also have the ability to do it from the sales channel side of things as well, if you want to have that ability where the system automatically splits inventory based on sales channels and rules that you can build in the system as well. So that's just the supply allocations element. The next part I'd like to take you through is the supply snapshots, which is something that's been added and continue to be added in NetSuite. And what it does, it actually enables you to simulate inventory, demand, and supply across your supply chain. So let me just go into that. If I go list, supply chain, and then supply chain snapshots. This is where I've actually created a few snapshots for different products. So I'll choose the product that we were just in, which is this AL product 4122, where I can see from a particular snapshot where it was run on the 1st of April. We're using the past horizon date of January to pick up anything historical, and we're actually projecting out to the end of April based to look at what our the demand and supply equation looks like for this particular product. So over here, I'm just looking at the inventory, which is the 35 quantity you saw. I'm looking at it from that particular Melbourne warehouse standpoint. I can look at it from all warehouses as well if need be. I can also change your screen to actually move fields from here to there just by customizing the view. But at the moment, I can look at and say, okay, there's 35 on the floor, and therefore these are the actual sales orders, right, that are actually taking up that stock. But you can see every single time it's taken up the stock and see negative inventory that's happening as a result, even though there is allocated supply that is on that actual allocated to that order, whether it's a purchase order or an inbound shipment. But you may also want to run simulations where you can actually create simulation transactions to actually view the impacts of what that would do to the actual, overall demand supply equation for this actual product. All right.
So Robbie, you can run that by supplier? You
can run that only by item at the moment. Right. But we can add the supply entity record here and run it by an actual entity if need be.
Because you can use it then to give your supplier some visibility in what your future demand's going to be.
Yeah, 100%. So at the moment, I've got it by item, but you can actually add the entity by supplier in there as well. And then from that, you can run your simulation. So at the moment, I've got a particular simulation over here, which is a transaction, where I've actually say that a particular purchase order of 150 is going to be supplied by the 9th of April 2022 into the Melbourne location. The status is under review, right? So you have multiple statuses here where you can actually have different approval processes in the organization if you want to manage and have certain people create simulations and then have manager to approve it to then enforce those changes where a purchase gets created or suppliers are actually notified and try to work better dates with them. That's all part of this as well. And you also have the ability to communicate with NetSuite with tasks in here as well. So that's just running simulations. But the other great thing as well on top of this is you have the ability to actually look at the control tower dashboard, right? Where this will take you into a dashboard. They can also add into your center in as well if you wanted to set up a custom tab. Where it's actually going to show you the alerts of all the purchase orders that are past receipt, all the sales orders that are past due, transfer orders, work orders, and the rest. And at the same time, look at the predictive risks that the system has come back to you with based on actual orders, being purchase orders, transfer orders, or sales orders, as to from the history of dealing with suppliers that you're bringing supply into, giving you some predictive recommendations as to what you should do with those orders. So an example of that is there's 3 late purchase orders over here that relate to saying 100% likelihood that this particular purchase order, and if I click into it, is actually going to be 4 days late. And the reason why it's going to be 4 days late is the history of this particular vendor, being Rome GmbH, actually has NetSuite calculated in the background based on a scheduled job that happens either once a week or once a month. You can set the frequency of it. That will then go and look at the history, and based on the historical horizons you set up, to therefore calculate what the predicted days early or late for that supplier is going to be, and therefore what's the risk confidence associated with them actually missing or hitting that actual delivery in full as well. All right, so over here it's actually telling me that it's expecting that this particular purchase order 435 for that particular product for Melbourne, that has a due delivery date at the moment of the 10th of April, is going to be 4 days late, and the confidence of them being of this based on history is 100% confidence system expecting that's going to be late. Now, what you can do is you can actually jump in. It's going to take you to the actual supply chain snapshot, so you can have a look at the actual current inventory for that particular item, what the actual purchases are, or any sales orders are, or transfer orders are, or any other transactions are that's actually taken on that stock. But you're looking at this at the moment saying, okay, there's one sales order. That sales order is past due because they're wanting that sales order to be delivered on the 23rd. So as a result, we need to look at what we can do to ensure that we can therefore deliver this sales order on time. So you've got 435 and 456, and there's 435 there. So if you want to add this to the recommendation, what this is going to do is actually add in a simulation, right? Which therefore gets a simulator created, that therefore you're able to go and look at the snapshot as to what that means when you actually are simulating that particular bringing forward of that purchase order into the mix. And then you can go through the standard process of going in to that simulation, updating the simulation to, get it approved, authorized, and then push through to actually have that purchase order updated in NetSuite as a process. Otherwise, you can just go and update the purchase order directly if the recommendation is telling you to do that, just by jumping to the purchase order and then making that change accordingly, and then communicating that change to the actual customer. So you just updated the expected receipt date by 4 days. Hopefully that all makes sense. If I go back to the control tower again, I can also look at the late sales orders as well, and the same sort of thing. I can see that for these particular sales orders, the system is calculating that these are going to be 10 days late. And then we can jump into the actual snapshot and look at the snapshot on those as well, and therefore manage those sales orders accordingly. So that's the demo I had today. I'm not sure if there's any questions out there because I'm too busy sharing my screen. If I stop sharing, any questions of anyone for us for the next 5-10 minutes? Hopefully this, David and I, are giving you some food for thought in relation to how you can look at specific things in your organization, whether they're process elements, working with your suppliers to look at better ways of getting delivery of your stock into the warehouse, coupled with working with customers as well, like David mentioned, around the customer service side of things.
Well, I think that's one of the big outcomes of this whole disruption at the moment, Rob, is it gives a lot of companies and executives the opportunity to really enhance their relationship with their customers. This gives you great opportunities to do that, and create a good story out of a major problem.
And it's only going to get worse, because the globalization aspect, as we both know, David, I know you and I have spoken a while, is like the globalization is actually, coming to a head at the moment. And we're all beginning to look at manufacturing in Australia and improving our own supply chain.
Well, there's a big talk about reshoring and all that sort of stuff that's going on. So we're in for a lot of change. This is not going to go away very quickly.
And that's why NetSuite as well has put a lot of effort. Like I said, the things I've just shown you today have just come out in the last 3 releases. that every customer is getting as part of their upgrade into solution, just a matter of turning it on. But, you know, if you've got this disruption in your market and you're trying to get better visibility and using some level of predictive analytics within an ERP to, you know, help you see where orders may be late, may be early based on the performance of that vendor. And that's the other thing I forgot to show is NetSuite does have a vendor performance screen where you can actually see for all your actual vendors what the actual average, you know, late and early is for each one of those, and therefore run reports in your organization and then start enacting some processes internally to have those reviews, update master data to have preferred vendors maybe changed from vendor A to vendor B, and because you can trust them more because, you know, so.
Exactly right. I think you might have answered Stephen's questions there about what the availability on those modules.
Yeah, so that supplier snapshot is part of the standard solution. So if you've got advanced inventory in your organization as the module, that's included as part of it. So it's not a suite app or anything of that nature. It's just the flick of the switch in the enable features, I think under transactions, under enable features, or is it under items and inventory? One of those two, you'll see supplier allocations and also supply chain snapshots. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it.
No? No. Any words of wisdom, David?
Only that, as I said, I think the current disruptions are creating a lot of opportunities for people. So if they do use the framework in many ways to pull apart their existing supply chain operations and so forth, and measure yourself against each of those elements, it helps create a plan for you about where the improvements can come from and the areas that you need to undertake to get those sort of things. So.
Thank you. And yes, Stephen, session's recorded, and the marketing team will share the recording to all participants who are registered in the event today.
Sure. So if there's no other questions, we should probably wrap it up, and I don't think anybody complains about going home early.
No. We've finished a couple of these, 10 minutes early. So either I talk too fast or they went too fast. Excuse me, I'm just battling COVID. I'm just recovered from COVID. So thank you very much, David. Appreciate your time. And
thanks for having me.
I'm really grateful for it. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye.